Hi everyone, my name is Ruth Kikin-Gil and I'm really excited to welcome you to this special session of MLADS. And our guest today is Jenny Sabin, the wonderful artist that created this work of art that you can see right behind me. This piece of art is called Ada. It's an AI-powered pavilion, an installation that combines science and technology and art and magic and people's reactions and emotions, and all of it is brought to you here in one space. So I want to welcome you, Jenny. Hi.
Thank you. Hello. It's wonderful to be here.
It's great to have you, and I have so many questions to ask you, but I'm just going to, concentrate on a few. So maybe we'll start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your career as an artist before Ada.
Sure. So I'm an architectural designer with a background in the fine arts. I started as a ceramic sculptor and painter. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington, so working with colleagues and friends at Microsoft Research on Ada was an incredible experience on many fronts, but also including coming back home, as it were. So I was a practicing artist for many years, based in Seattle, and then decided to pursue my graduate work in architecture at the University of Pennsylvania, primarily because I was searching for a way to integrate my ongoing interests between technology, science, design, and the fine arts. So at root, I am a maker. I'm very invested in looking at how emerging technologies meet our built environment and meet the material world. And so those inspirations and interests are very much at the forefront of Ada. In addition to my practice, which is now framed through Jenny Sabin Studio, I am an associate professor of architecture at Cornell University, teaching design studios and seminars on topics including emerging technologies and design, but also specifically based on my ongoing collaborations with colleagues across disciplinary boundaries, innovating new materials and fabrication protocols, and so on. And that's where my lab, which is housed within the College of Architecture, Art and Planning, comes to the fore, where my students and research associates and collaborators work together on common projects crossing disciplinary boundaries.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And especially the part about the collaboration, which seems to be like some kind of thread, right? So maybe you can tell us about the collaboration that you had with the researchers here in MSR and about Ada. How did that come about and what is it about and why Ada?
Sure. I look forward to speaking at length about the project. I was fortunate to meet Asta Roseway early on, as well as her colleague Mira, at an event that the University of Washington, the School of Art, was hosting. I'm a graduate of the School of Art at the UW, and they had invited me to give a keynote talk. And fortunately, Asta and Mira happened to be in the audience and were really excited about the work that I presented and approached me afterwards. And that was the beginning of what became a multi-year conversation. And so we kicked off our collaboration in the spring of 2018 as part of the Artist in Residence program at Microsoft Research, which Asta Roseway founded and kicked off previously. And so in the beginning, we were interested in approaching the topic of artificial intelligence, but importantly from a standpoint that would be human-centered, to really think about the ethical issues of AI, to consider how technology is actuated by design and the arts, to consider how a potential project could really serve as an interface for exploring these ideas and provocations to inspire dialogue, and also, equally importantly, to serve as a platform for research. You know, that Ada in its final state could potentially be an interface for researchers at Microsoft Research to use in an ongoing fashion. So we began a whole series of conversations over many months. I was able to travel out frequently and work with Asta and others. And over the course of the initial phase of the project, we began to formalize a starting point and began to set a series of constraints, material systems. I began to embark upon a collaboration and dialogue with Daniel McDuff, who really spearheaded and led all of the AI and machine learning algorithms that are incorporated into the project. And so that's how we started. Really, it was through a series of conversations and, you know, forming a friendship, a series of friendships and a dialogue that were really built upon some synergies that we started to see at the very beginning.
Well, you know, talking about synergies, I was very curious to know how you're thinking about the use of technology, specifically AI, in that installation, in the work. I look at this as the work as a work of translation, right? You're taking people's emotions and turning them into math and algorithms, and you're taking that and you're creating another experience which is visceral, and then that influences people. And to do all that, you are using AI. And what I was curious about was, how do you think about that AI? Is that an extension of you? Is that just a utilitarian tool? Is that something more? What's your metaphor for that relationship?
Well, I really shy away from metaphors. I mean, for us, AI served as a kind of dynamic interface for exploring aspects of our environments and how we relate to our environments. So it's, you know, both a tool and a technology, but also an ability to. It allows us to look at the kind of hidden structures of data and to begin to make sense of that data in a new way, to perhaps begin to understand a bit more about ourselves. And so a couple of the driving questions that really sparked the project were, how might we design and enhance architecture and space and the integrated material systems with the bioarchitecture and behavior of our own bodies and local environments? And also, can building materials be made more responsive through the integration of artificial intelligence and big data? And so for me, AI is not a metaphor, but it really it's a technology and an interface for introspection and beginning to think about how the spaces that we inhabit could be made more personal, could be more, you know, reflexive. And so fundamentally, AI or Ada explores how artificial intelligence can personalize space and buildings. So we think that Ada is the first architectural pavilion structure to incorporate AI, and it's through the precise integration of responsive materials, which include high-tech responsive fibers, including photoluminescent fibers, so they absorb energy from the UV light sources, as well as fiber optics, which are incorporated as a skin on the central tensegrity cone, which has a camera, the only camera within the center of the project that can actually override the full network of cameras. So you can actually drive Ada yourself when you're inside of the project. And it's through these responsive materials that are directly integrated with live data feeds of data collected from the network of cameras within Building 99 at Microsoft Research. That Ada overall has the capacity to hopefully promote and increase well-being and ultimately healthy environments through people's direct engagement with its architecture. And so more specifically, the lightweight pavilion is composed of responsive and data-driven tubular and cellular components that are digitally knit through a process called whole garment. I've been working with Shima Siki since 2012 as a collaborator. They're at the forefront of what's called whole garment knitting, which is seamless digital knitting in 3D. And these components are all finished and sewn into a continuous double surface that is tensioned by a 3D printed semi-rigid exoskeleton, which is what you see on the exterior of Ada. So there's a semi-rigid skin on the exterior and then a soft surface on the interior. And structurally, they work in a reciprocal fashion. So the exoskeleton is in compression and the interior soft surface is in continuous tension.
You said that the cameras capture things in the building. Can you talk about that and how do that translate into what we're seeing in the pavilion, in the installation?
Yeah, definitely. So the lighting system and the materials of Ada respond to human participation as both individual and collective facial pattern data, which are collected through the network of cameras housed within the building, throughout the building. And these are processed by AI algorithms, which is the part of the collaboration with Daniel McDuff and his team. And then that data is transmitted as sentiment through light and color. And so that's what we worked on primarily, is how that data would then be translated into material effects and overall affect in terms of the lighting responding to the data, but then also allowing for the materials within the project to emit light, to glow, to change color, and to reflect that human sentiment back as a spatial experience, as a responsive material experience as well.
What surprised you through this process? What were the new things that you did not know or didn't think about and came out as part of that process?
I think, I mean, Ada really was, you know, the process of producing Ada, the collaboration that ensued with many people at Microsoft Research was as important as the final materialized result, which is just behind you in Building 99. And, you know, for me, it was just so exciting to have the opportunity to see firsthand the ongoing research that is happening at Microsoft Research. And, you know, to be able to kind of peer behind the curtain, as it were, and to really see, you know, the kind of cutting edge of what's happening in AI. And that, I mean, that was a big surprise, but also through that process, you know, an important aim of the project is to expand and inspire architectural engagement with humans. And so while artificial intelligence powers the project through the precise narrowing and statistical averaging of data collected from individual and collective facial patterns and voice tones, the materials and the architecture of Ada augments human emotion through beauty and an aesthetic experience, which ultimately opens the range of possible human emotional engagement. And so, you know, on the opening night, just watching people interact with Ada and to see that kind of range expand and ultimately feed back into the project as new information was really, really exciting, because, you know, in turn, the project opens new pathways for fundamental research on the use of AI to correlate connections between human sentiment and the local environment, and also to consider how personalized architecture may sense subtle changes in human emotion through sensors and interfaces that detect changes in facial patterns and voice tones, and respond in ways that increase well-being and promote healthier environments, which is really fundamental to the research that Daniel McDuff and his team are spearheading at MSR. Because, you know, ultimately, I think the mission of the project is to explore how the spaces and environments that we inhabit influence and partially shape who we are and how we are feeling. And through the integration of responsive materials, including the digital knitting materials, the 3 tiers of responsive lighting that activate the high-tech responsive fibers, including the interior central tensegrity cone, which houses a custom skin of fiber optics. So it's through the integration of these responsive materials and emerging technologies that allows for an interface for potentially, you know, personalizing architecture to make it more human and reflexive. And so those were some of the, you know, kind of driving aspects of the project, and also ultimately framed the surprises, you know, just really seeing how people engaged with it, both researchers and staff at MSR, but also people who were able to attend the opening night, and to consider those rhythms and patterns that would change, you know, throughout a given day, as well as seasonally, and you know, to think about how Ada really began to register those rhythms of human engagement.
So, you know, when I saw this installation, I started thinking about Stuart Brand and how he was talking about, you know, buildings that learn, and how the buildings that are adapt to their inhabitants, to the people who live there, are the ones that have the longevity, and how there is a transformation or potential for transformation for architects to move from being artists of space into artists of time. And I'm curious to know, do you think about yourself as an artist of time, and what does that mean for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it makes me think about some of the early pioneers who were looking at the relationships between cybernetics and architecture. Key protagonists like Gordon Pask and Cedric Price and others. In the 70s and 60s, 70s, 80s, where there were actual, architecture studios and design studios and collaborations between scientists, computer scientists, experts in cybernetics and architecture, trying to look at the possibilities of a truly adaptive architecture and buildings that potentially could learn. And for me, considering the possibility of engaging with time and change, materiality, and this is very much at root with Ada, is something that's co-produced over time. And it's, on the one hand, materials responding to their local environments and inputs, but also it equally is part our response and our engagement and aspects of human perception and emotion. And so materiality is something that is about that reflexive exchange. And so an architecture that evolves through one's engagement and their embedment within those relationships, I think is really exciting. And these ideas, I don't think, and this is why I brought up Gordon Pask and Cedric Price and others, they're not necessarily new, but we now have the tools and the capability of exploring that complexity and these incredible dynamic feedback loops in ways that were never possible before. And so exploring AI through cutting edge research like that of Daniel McDuff and Asta Roseway and others at MSR, really allowed us to kind of completely open up that spectrum. So I guess my answer would be yes. There's one thing that we can count on is change, and considering architecture and the spaces that we inhabit as something that evolves with that change, both in terms of our kind of individual impact, but also through our local environments is incredibly exciting. And so Stuart Brand, was, I think, spot on and speculating upon the possibility of buildings learning and adapting and responding, and humans, steering that and personalizing the potential of that.
Well, Jenny, thank you so much. And I'm sure that there are many other questions that I have and would like to ask you, but I'm also sure that there are people right now in the audience that would love to start that conversation with you. So I'm not going to hog you. I'm going to give you to the audience and open the floor for other questions. Thank you so much.
Fantastic, Ruth. Well, I really look forward to the questions from the audience. Thank you so much.